Day of 4coder stuff. We're going to be working on all the stuff that I have in my to-do list. I'll pull it up in a second here. There we go. Make sure my chats are up. Okay. To do. So, yesterday we got through everything from here to here. This whole block, basically laying more groundwork for more stuff, and now we're going to try to do this whole block. It's a big block, but I think a lot of this is quick stuff. So the first thing on this list is this thing here. We kind of have the basics for this already in place, but I want to think about it for a little bit how I will actually do it. So I could just make the whole 4coder switch over to this, but I want it to have both modes available. And so I had to think about how the both modes part is going to work. Obviously I know how to set the boolean in a config file, but what is the more interesting question is how do I want to organize the different meanings of the different commands. It's not clear to me how best to do that. So let me just play around with it for a little bit. Hey Brett, so let's see, the thing we need is, let's go to the framework variables and switch to ibar or highlight range, and then let's go to base commands here, and then a lot of the things that matter, so like write character matters, delete character, backspace character, set mark wouldn't be a thing anymore, cursor mark swap wouldn't be a thing, delete range could still be a thing. So yeah, a lot of stuff has to change. Let me make kind of a list of things that are like, we're going to make a quick table here, so it's going to be key, which key we're interested in, the Emacs mode, and I'll call it Notepad mode. Alright, and then what we want to do is first of all pad out all of these so we don't run out of space for any of them. And then what we want to do is go like this. And now keys that we care about include any like text in Emacs mode, insert at character or at cursor. In Notepad mode, what that does is like if highlight, if range, delete range, and then insert. Right? Guess we need even more space. Maybe I should just use Google Docs and use an actual table or something, I don't know. Or build a table mode into 4coder. That wouldn't be a totally impossible thing. Okay. So if I just type a character, then in Emacs mode you just insert that at the cursor. In Notepad mode you see if you have a range and delete the range, and then you insert you know, at the cursor. Okay. So there's one thing. What else we have? So we have the key delete. In Emacs, that's delete at cursor, and here it's if range, whoops, let's call this delete range. So if range, again, delete range, This time, however, it's going to be else delete at cursor. I'm hoping if we just make a list of all the major differences, I can see how big the list is and make a smart plan, or find some way to express both modes in a succinct way without like lots of different maps or anything. So there's delete, there's backspace. Again, this is backspace at cursor, and this is backspace. Okay. Delete backspace. Don't need a set mark at all in this mode, so we'll call this like the set mark key, whatever that happens to be. This one does set mark. This does nothing. Maybe I'll just put that to signify that it does nothing. Okay. That one we could keep. Delete range we could keep. Click and set mark. That's the same. That's the same. Okay. So up and down, left and right are all different. So I'm going to say arrow, move cursor, direction, move cursor direction, and set mark to cursor. Now with shift arrow, this would just be move cursor direction again. And this would be move cursor direction, and it wouldn't set the mark. Same thing with things like page up, down, page up / down, move cursor page, and then this is move cursor page and set mark to cursor. So for all these navigation ones, the idea is basically going to be it's the same as this with a move set the mark to the cursor afterward. So that's the same. Okay, yep, that's the same. All of this is the same. Go to line is a navigation command. It would want to be different. iSearch would be considered a navigation command, I think. Yeah, so the hard thing is we basically would want to say here are all the commands that count as navigation commands, and then for all of them do this. So I guess it's hard to say. It might be better if I always move the marker to the cursor in this mode, and then just have a special case where I don't when I notice that the shift is held down, right? That would be one way to do it. And then, yeah, this actually affects a lot of stuff. So, anything that's navigation based would have this change. Anything which it does an edit would have sort of case-by-case difference, because like paste, for instance, would do the same thing as text input, but then after a paste, I guess you would highlight the selected range the way it still does. So this would be like these commands shouldn't do the set mark like, well, these ones should, but paste would be one that shouldn't set mark to cursor. You know what I mean? This might not be as easy as I thought it would be. I thought it would just be a matter of changing the navigation of the mark in a couple of key places and replacing a few of these things, but there's actually like a bunch of these. So So one way to interpret this is that we could write all of the code in this method, in this format, and say if range blah, if range blah, if range blah, and then for at least these three, if we just say range, the range predicate is always false in Emacs mode, then this works. So I want to go check out how paste should look. So paste, okay, so paste would work the same as this stuff, right? It would be again another case of this, I guess. So paste is like, do the paste, and in this case it's if range, delete range, and then paste. I mean, what's a little confusing is some of them are else's and some of them aren't, but whether that's whatever. Either way, if this is false, this column becomes this column. So with paste it works. With copy, what happens is we need a way to say get the range, and that has to mean different things in these two different cases, because we're saying the if range predicate is always false in Emacs mode, but in this case we actually do want to be able to get the range. So the range actually always exists in Emacs mode. It's the thing between the cursor and the mark. It's just that the if like highlighted range, maybe I should call these if h range, and in Emacs mode h range is always false. And in Notepad mode, this is true when cursor does not equal mark. Okay. Okay, interesting. Paste, copy. So the way copy works is just the same either way. You just copy, this is like paste at cursor, and so is this, paste at cursor. This is just copy range. And we don't care now, the range exists either way, we just don't care to check if there's a highlighted range in either case. Copy range. Okay, now paste next, for instance, is another complicating factor because with these we're assuming we always are going to be setting the mark to the cursor, except in this one case. But paste next requires that the range be on the thing that was just last pasted. So paste would have to be a special case where we don't set the mark back to the cursor in this mode. So we couldn't just write command caller call command if mode equals Notepad and input dot modifier shift then mark equals cursor. Right, so this is kind of what I'd like to do, but it's not quite this simple. Maybe I just need a specialized list of commands that can also say, hey, don't move my mark. What I could do is say that there's like a variable that's like if mode equals Notepad, set the global variable reset mark after command to true, and then afterwards, if we're still in Notepad mode and reset mark after command is still true, then we reset the mark to command, and then any command that in Notepad mode should not reset the mark can explicitly put in a tag that says, hey, also reset mark after command equals false. So in this way, the default is true. The few cases where we don't want it to happen, we set to false. That's here, here, and maybe for like well, technically this is for here. No, it's actually for both. But yeah, I see the point. Okay, I think we can do this. So let's start with the command caller. And while we're at it, we're going to put ourselves into the framework variables and go ibar or note, or why don't we go with fcoder mode Emacs like Notepad like. This is just the beginning. We probably won't leave it this way forever. Not sure. Fcoder mode equals, we're going to set it to Notepad-like for now. Okay. Now, what we want to do is here in the command caller, static managed variable ID view, or this could even just be at a global level, right? No, I suppose it should be a view. View snap mark to cursor equals 0, and then what we're going to do is manage if fcoder mode equals fcoder mode Notepad like, then we're going to manage variable set inside the scope from this view. We're going to set view snap mark to cursor to true. And then, after all is said and done, if fcoder mode equals fcoder mode Notepad like, and then we're going to, what we'll do is uint64t val equals if managed variable, this should be managed variable set, if managed variable get app scope view snap mark to cursor val, if val does not equal 0, then we'll take view set mark app view, we should probably view equals get view app view.viewid access all view.cursor position seek position. View snap mark to cursor. Yep. Okay, now all we want to do is track down this. There we go. Okay, and now snap mark to cursor looks good, and set mark, that looks like it's going to work. So whoops, I misspelled all in the case sensitivity sense. Oops. Something is feeling extra piggy and bad today. I don't know. OBS is just up at 25. Okay. Oh well. So, let's see. We want to run that. I don't even have my debugger up yet. Okay. So now I can't ever highlight a range because as I'm trying to click and drag, it's snapping the mark back to the cursor all the time. You see that? Okay, so let's start by getting click and drag back. Base commands. Okay, where is this thing that I am looking for? Click set cursor, if L button. Yeah, so managed variable set, we're going to have to get the managed scope from the view And then we're going to use that scope to set the view snap mark to cursor to false. And that right there seems like I'm going to do it frequently enough that we're going to say no snap, no marker snap to cursor application links app view summary view ID. Let's start with manage scope because I might also get opportunities to do that. So view scope and then no mark snap to cursor application links view ID, get the scope, no mark snap to cursor app scope, no mark snap to cursor app view.view ID. Okay, so I can now just say wherever I'm setting the cursor in such a way that I don't think the mark should move with it, we put that in there, and hopefully that will be enough to whoops, this should be view scope, this should be view snap mark to cursor. Oh, there it worked. Okay, so it's working forward but not backward. I find that interesting, and I also know exactly what's causing it. So in the default hooks, if we go to the render caller real quick, we will see that we put the cursor first and then the mark, which means that if the cursor is larger than the mark, we have a large number and then a small number. And then when we do the range, those two get grabbed, and for some reason that doesn't go through properly. So we're going to need to put a breakpoint into the right location to find it. Let's take a look. Okay. 509 0. 509 0. Oh, I see. Then it uses the larger position. Okay. So we want to go to 590 to change that. Wrong file, my mistake. Alright, this should be coming out of the range, which we've already done the swap on to make sure they're in the right order. Something's happening when I move my mouse that loses the selection. That's not a good sign. We don't want passive stuff that causes this. So how are we going to prevent random passive stuff from constantly having to do this, like snapback thing? Would it actually be better if snapback was off by default and we had to turn it on? Then it seems like there's a lot of stuff where we have to manually turn snapback on. This whole thing, you know. Yeah, okay, let's track down what happens when I move my mouse, because that appears to be what it is. There it is. I already know what I need to change. Jim asked, what's the snapback thing that I keep mentioning? The snapback thing is that since we're doing click and drag, we're doing click and drag in such a way that it still uses the same cursor and mark that's in 4coder anyway, except now it default snaps the mark back to the cursor after every command, unless you specifically say this is a command where the mark and cursor can be separated afterwards, because this is a command that is meant for creating highlighted ranges. Alright, let's take a look. Let's take a look. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's good. Things like double click don't work, which you really want. You want to be able to double click to get a word and then triple click to get the whole line. It's going to take time to get this fully there, but hopefully this will at least encourage people that have been worried that it's never coming to see that I finally got the basics in place to make it happen. Hello world. Now I can't hold shift and select, but I can do copy, paste, 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 X, V. Alright, we're getting there, right? So that's the very basics. Now, let's, anywhere that we can do navigation stuff. There's a lot of these. We're just going to say anything that does navigation stuff works even if you're holding shift. And then what we'll do is inside these commands, although technically I don't need to or modifier none with other things, so get rid of that. And maybe it would be a bit easier if this was organized a bit better. Okay, now what we want to do is, I think that's all of them. We'll want to spam that out to all the Mac ones too real quick. Up, down, left, right, del back, up, down, left, right, up, down, and I think these are all just totally identical except they use the word command instead of control whenever they have to. Well, I guess some of them still use control, so which ones? The ones that still use control and alt are the last two up down use alt and the page up page down use control. Okay. Okay, so we have the Mac and Windows bindings both spammed out to now can support shift versions of all of these commands. So we want to switch to into tracing them all down and making sure that they do the right thing when shift is held down. Move vertical. Okay, so no marker snap to cursor. No mark snap to cursor if shift. Application links app view ID if or what we want is command in user input in equals get command input app if in dot, and then we need to track down user input user input type ID, user input key, and in key event data modifiers, modifier index, modifier shift index, then no mark to cursor app view ID. And then if we go down here to move up, we can just call no mark snap to cursor if shift app move vertical app view.viewID. So that should take care of move up, move down. Uh-oh. So apparently MetaGen doesn't do a good job with the generation part. Dang, okay. Zoop. Okay, there we go. And now, you want to get back to base command, so move up, move down, page up and page down, those are all covered. So up, down are covered. Let's track that. Okay, here's move left. And we're going to do no cursor, no marks, cursor if shift, app, view ID, move right. Let's see, so move up, move down, move left, move right. These are all covered. Seek end of line. Go to beginning of line. So none of that is here. Ooh, go to line. No, that one won't have it. End of file. No. Page up and page down, we just said I already have it. So let's see, I think we need to track down seek.cpp. Seek end of line. Yeah, so all of these things, seek white space up, and all that want to have this call. Seek white space down, seek beginning of textual line, seek end of textual line, seek beginning of line, seek end of line, seek white space up, end line, seek white space down, end line, go to beginning of file, go to end of file. My mistake. I mistakenly thought that those up-downs deserved this, and they don't. Okay, so those things I wrote into base commands should move all the way up to helper. Helper is where I just throw things that I need to be available in multiple places that I don't have the time to think about. And so, because of that, if we take a look at the things that are in helper, it's like this crazy long list of functions that are all super short. We have things about ranges. I think we have things about, you know, views, creating buffers. No, that's not there anymore. Interesting. Open buffer then or something. All the set hook stuff. All the bind stuff. We've got sort. Do I have binary search? I see. I do have a thing for opening standard file or C runtime library style file handles. These build string things, you know, you get the idea. Hey, how is it that there's a how do you have braid emoticons in my chat room? I didn't set any of that up. How does that happen? I don't know how that happens. I have not seen Visual Studio's Code Snippet Maker. Does Doubter happen to be lurking around here today? Because I have a question for him too. I didn't get a copy of that link he posted yesterday. Might close the chat before I remember to get a copy of it. Yeah, you can post Imgur links, I believe. Okay, so if we go back to seek, again, define seek white space up, white space down, and then let's just keep going. So why don't we do current view boundary seek set position. Okay, so that covers a lot of these, which is good. And okay. You're right, I can pull up the VOD. That's a good plan. That's what I'll do. Is there a way to get a callback for new tokens in 4coder yet? No, not really. That's not like it doesn't send you a callback when the Lexer has detected a new token or anything like that. I'm not really sure. I'd have to think about how that would even work. It's quite a complicated topic. Not straightforward at all. But you will be able to do highlighting of strings yourself and stuff. We're going to do that today after what I'm working on right now. Alright, hello world. I hold down shift and go left, 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 left. I stop holding down shift and I do this. Hey, A. So that part doesn't work yet, but I can do boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. So that part doesn't work. Paste next doesn't work. Interestingly, oh, backspace doesn't, yeah, backspace is that. Okay. So we got navigation kind of working. Let's play with navigation a little bit more, but I think that's the navigation stuff up and running. Let's try and look at some code with virtual whitespace. Indent.cpp has been my regular thing for a while. Pretty cool. Captain Craft asks, I've noticed you're doing edits in multiple rows. Is that already in 4coder? I don't think I've ever known about that feature. Yes and no. So it doesn't really work that well, but under the experiments file, that's used to be the power tier in Patreon, and since I moved it to H, it's just in the full version. So if you have the $12 package, experiments is in there now. You don't have to pay extra above the normal customization layer anymore for it. And in experiments, I have a few things that are useful, but not quite. They're not implemented in such a way that they actually always work. So it's like, if the killrect, for instance, if the virtual whitespace is turned on, and I do something like, I put a bunch of spaces on this one. Now, if I show you, I'm on column 21 here and column 5 here. So even though they look lined up, they're not, because there's a bunch of spaces here that the virtual whitespace is hiding. And then I try to do a killrect on it. That worked out okay that time. But there's like, if I'm remembering correctly, there's like some kind of, it might be that the other one is the one that's broken. So let me do this. I'm going to put in a bunch of spaces, and we're going to do, there it is. So you see that? The way it doesn't actually work. Killrect is actually maybe ready to go, I guess. I could put that one up. But multi-line edit only really works if you're careful about not triggering its bugs. So I don't want to put that in the main thing yet, and it's not really possible or easy. It's very difficult for me to get it to the point where it works properly in the current engine. So I'm just leaving it there in experiments. If you want to use it, you can compile the experimental stuff into your bindings and get used to how to work around the bugs. It does speed you up if you learn it, but it's like, I'm not putting anything under experiments. I'm not saying that I'm taking responsibility for quality of these things. So if you don't like the bugs, then you know why it's in experiments, and it's on you for using it. Same thing with multi-paste. What else we have in here? Rename parameter kind of works, but it does have, like, it won't actually work because it can't tell when it sees a name, it doesn't know if that name actually refers to that parameter or it just happens to be the same name. So if you have a parameter that's called next node, but then later you also have a member of a struct that's called next node, it'll rename that even though it shouldn't. So there's another example of this kind of thing. Same thing with the enum filler stuff. So this will automatically fill in the values of an enum, but it only works if you are very strict about the things you have, like comments will get clobbered and stuff if you're not careful. And then there's one more good one. Oh, replace all occurrences. This one is dangerous. You can replace all occurrences of a string in all open buffers. That's only in experiments because it's dangerous, and I don't want people to use that thinking that it does for like a single buffer or something. So just prevent people from accidentally borking their whole system, especially because I don't have a global undo. If you change something across 20 buffers, and then you're like, oh no, I had changes in some of them, and what do? I have to track down each buffer and undo for that buffer, and so because it's hard to recover from it if you misuse it, that one's an experiment as well. Okay, so let's see, I need to go to base commands again. Okay, so the next thing we were looking at is that's pretty much all the navigation stuff working. We now have it do the set mark to cursor unless shift was held down, and we can just spam that one function anywhere that I've missed it to fix it. So I'm not too worried about this part of it. Now the hard part is all of these things that are implemented in such a way that right now they just do this, and in Notepad mode they would do this code, and if we just always have hrange be false in Emacs mode, then this code is equal to this code. So we want to do this part of it now. So let's start by going back into helper, and we will say view has hrange or highlighted range, application links, app, view summary, view, switch on fcoder mode, case fcoder mode Emacs like, oops, return false, case fcoder mode Notepad like, return view.cursor.position does not equal view.mark.position. And what I should really do is have them specify a view ID, and then right here we'll get the view to make sure we have the most up-to-date version of the view when we do this. So get view app view ID access all. So really, this could do this, this could do this, boom, boom, boom. View, return. Okay. So now we have the ability to do that. What we might want to also add is ability to do if view has highlighted range, delete range, and this will be the same as this, and we'll do if view has highlighted range, app view ID, return false, return true, grab the view again, range equals make range view cursor. Wait, I think I have a way to get range. Make range. There it is, get view range. View. And then what we want to do is say get buffer app view.buffer ID access open, buffer replace range app buffer range.min range.max 0, 0, and then return true. And so now, if we track down, using this function here, we can track down these things. So like write character. Before we write the character, we call if view has highlighted range, delete range. We pass in the app and the active view ID, and whether or not it does do that delete, we then go ahead and insert the character. Okay. There's also delete char. So with this one, what we do is, well, this code is a bit unusual to me. If view has highlighted range, delete range, app view.viewID. So this one, we only do this work if the view did not do the delete range operation. Yeah. Same thing with this one. App view.viewID. So just backspace character, set mark, mark cursor swap, delete range. So that's all the same. Let's track down paste. So paste has a couple of interesting properties. First of all, I think yeah, we want to have it do a no mark snap to cursor if it successfully does the paste. Then the other thing we want to do with this one is, again, before we actually do this part of the work, we want to say view delete view if view has highlighted range, delete range. Yes. App view.viewID. We'll do that before this one. With this one, paste next. We actually won't do it because this is doing a paste next does a replace over the spot it's at anyway. And then finally, if we're doing search, the word complete also wants to do a no mark snap to cursor. I guess a mark can snap to cursor on this one, I guess. I don't know. Okay, I guess we make a copy of the string rather than using the range, which makes sense. And we must be keeping the position that we're replacing, but it's apparently not being kept with the mark, so we can let that work the way it does. Okay, so let's try this. We want to go, well, first of all, we're going to do foobar, highlight all this, and replace it with hello world. That's cool. We want to do experimental paste next stuff. We're going to copy hello, then we're going to copy world, and then we're going to paste weird. Okay, so paste next works, but paste actually doesn't work. This does the delete range because it sees that something is highlighted, and then it's like it should every time I paste just stay where it exactly was. It should keep replacing the word that I have on the on the buffer with itself. Because it should delete that range and then insert it again, but it doesn't. So I'm going to just use a breakpoint and watch what happens there. Can't see anything obviously wrong in 30 seconds, so debugger. Paste, and so the string world gets pasted in, and I paste again. I get the buffer, still at position 8. The world gets placed right there. The cursor is at 3, and the mark, how can they both be at 3 after this happened? I know. Alright, yeah, that looks funny what I just did right there, but why am I getting the view again? But it's because I made this mistake when I first set up the API that these summaries have some state that is copied in from the core whenever you create them, but then if you do a call that changes that state without going through the struct, like here, then that state will change, but the struct will be out of date, and so then you need to re-get the state. It's dumb, and I'm going to remove this in the beta mode. In 4coder beta, what we'll do is we'll only ever refer to things by IDs, and if you wanted to get cursor position, you wouldn't go through a view.cursor.position. You would just use a bunch of getters. This has the advantage of letting me change the summaries without like having binary incompatibility issues, because the summaries are no longer types that you have that are like members available to you. Instead, they're just handles that you talk to through calls that, you know, implementation details are hidden so that you're not bound to these kinds of things. This kind of nonsense. Okay. Okay. I can paste over that a million times and nothing happens. If I paste and then go hello world, then I can cycle through those like normal. If I just paste over it over and over again with normal paste, I just get world over and over again. I can do this kind of thing. I can still do this, right? Ah, but that does that. I see. That's going to be pretty annoying for anyone who wants to paste something a couple of times, because now if you paste it a couple times, it just copies right over itself. But that means that paste next would need to change the way it works, which I don't really want to deal with right now. So what do we do? I could just let paste next be a thing where you just end up in this mode stacking them up, maybe? I don't know. So here's what we could do. If you paste, we don't do this. If you want to use paste next, then the first thing you invoke should be paste next. If you paste and then try to use paste next, it will not go smoothly from one to the other. So that's a slight difference between the two modes. So now if I do hello world 4coder notepad, that's not how you spell notepad, Emacs, right, and then I start pasting, then it will work like a normal paste, right? And if I do paste next, oh, if we're going to get the scope, why don't we just do this? Hello world 4coder notepad Emacs. Paste, 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 paste next, paste next. And so now paste next can still cycle the way it's supposed to, and paste can stack up like it's supposed to. Cool. Okay. So I think we have. So there's one other thing I need to check to call this mode working. we're basically done with this, I think. I just want to check, like, if I'm in here and I do result dot, yeah, this all works. Sweet. Okay, so people who want to use 4coder like it's Notepad can now do it. Not quite. We need to add in some config options, but the details are in there. The implementation, I think, the base of it anyway. There might still be bugs, problems, but cursor navigation, inserting, paste, backspace, and delete, those are all working. So the only thing we're not doing is config options and toggle commands. So let's get that part of it done. Let's go to release config. Mode. Emax. Actually, I'm going to call it 4coder. The default 4coder mode that has been around since the beginning of 2015, since the beginning of time, 2015. Notepad like. Highlight ranges and single thin cursor and highlight ranges like in Notepad, Sublime, Notepad++, etc. Mode equals Notepad-like. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to track down the framework variables where I called the default mode, we're going to call it fcoder mode 4coder default. Fcoder mode 4coder legacy. 4coder original. Original. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to track down our config parsing stuff. We're going to find in release config, where is mapping? There it is. Config fixed string var, parse data, extract the mode. I don't know, 0. I know what that 0 stands for. I'm not telling you guys because you should know. But I know what the 0 means. It's a totally good API decision that I made that means I put a 0 there. Mode space. There we go. And then once we have a mode string, what do we do with it? Well, show me more about what you do with current mapping. Let's see here. You have a default. Okay, right. Config mode equals make fixed width string config mode space. Copy into the config mode. 4coder. Is that what I said it was called? It is. Okay. No, bring me back to the search results. Thank you. Boom, boom. Getting things figured out. Current mapping, yes. Feedback string, exactly. Feedback string. Space. Mode. Config mode. Next. Apply config. Okay. Change mode. App. Config mode. Let's go up to change mapping. There it is. Static void. Change mode. Application string mode. If match mode 4coder if match mode, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to say else if match mode Notepad like fcoder mode equals Notepad like original else print message app literal unknown mode. Done. Okay. So now for start one, for end one, that just expand braces. Why would you need for start one and for end one macros that expand to braces? So that you could, are you talking about, oh, being able to match them up so that you can see that 1 goes to 1 and 2 goes to 2? I see. I see. Okay, so everything I just did was about changing modes with the config, but yet I don't see the effect that I was expecting. Okay, there's something wrong. Mode. Build again. Whoops, no, please stick with mode. Okay, now what we want to do is, right here we have how are we rendering this, and I think that that's just bonkers, so wrong. What we're going to change this to is static bool32 cursor is hidden equals false. Boom. Okay, and then what we're going to do is go to the default hooks, render caller, and right here we're going to say if not cursor is hidden, do this work. This is going to be, take me back to the framework variables, the fcoder mode, and this is going to be fcoder mode original, and this is going to be fcoder mode notepad like. Cursor is hidden equals true. False. Done. This reminds me, we want to do highlight target in query replace. Okay, now save that, get back to the debugger, run it, and now, what was I testing? Okay, right. So we have this again. It's back to doing Emacs mode. I can type, and it won't replace. I can paste, and paste next works the way I'm used to. Good. I can do backspace, one character at a time, and so on. Okay, great. So that looks like it's all working. So now what we want to do is say, let's write some toggle commands so that I can toggle that at runtime, and that'll go under base commands. Toggle, where are all the toggles? Here they are. Not sure. Thought I made a toggle show line highlight somewhere. There it is. Okay. Custom command sig. Custom doc. Set mode to original. Sets the edit mode to 4coder original. fcoder mode equals fcoder mode original. To Notepad like. I think that's all I want for the toggle. I don't actually want a toggle in this one. Why would I want a toggle for this type? There might even be new type modes in the future. You can't toggle between 3 possible values. You could cycle between them, but I don't want to write a cycle command. I'm just going to go with the sets. Now what I can do is say, like, wow, this has been really great editing in original 4coder mode, but for this particular moment I'm feeling kind of Notepad-like. So I can say, screw it, where is my Notepad-like command? What's going on here, people? There it is. Okay, it's been good. Let me redo the simulation. It's been good writing stuff in 4coder mode, etc., etc. But man, I'm feeling so Notepad-like right now. Notepad-like, and all of a sudden it goes wonky. So I think when we set to Notepad mode, one thing we want to do is whenever we enter Notepad mode, we should probably so what we're going to do is say under helper, we're going to have a begin Notepad mode call. It's going to look like that. And in addition to doing that, it's going to say for view summary view equals get view first app access all. View dot exists view or get view next app view access all view or view set mark app view seek position view cursor position, and then under config cpp change mode. We want to call begin Notepad mode. Okay, so now, say I've been having a great day, I've been editing everything in 4coder original mode, and then it just occurs to me that, man, I feel like I would just be so much happier in Notepad mode. Then it doesn't highlight the thing I just had in my range before, because when we begin Notepad mode, it automatically does the snap across all the views, and now I'm in Notepad mode, and I can do Notepad-like things. I can go boom, boom, you know? Kinds of things that are a bit awkward sometimes in 4coder mode, suddenly, you know, it works that way now. Boom. Boom, no more pressing control space all the time. Maybe I'm happy this way. Maybe this is the way 4coder should have been all along, you know? I actually might use this for a little while and see if I prefer it. Also, I want to make sure it doesn't have too many bugs, but I might edit this way once this build comes out. See how I feel. Disable the highlight line at cursor, and now we're really talking. We got let's put in the color tweaker here. Midnight. Yeah. One thing I can't do is double click to get a line. That would be pretty nice still. But I can do stuff like that. It involves holding shift more often, which is not necessarily fun. But look at this. Look at this stuff. All custom side controlled too. If you want to make this be different, you can make it be different. We should make the scope highlighting thing customizable before the day is done. So let's move on. Okay, let's get to this query replace thing first. So that was a good landmark. Let's take a moment, take it in. We now have. Why is it so dark in here, by the way? It's like in the middle of the day. I don't know. I'm gonna go turn the light on, but first let's take it in. We have Notepad mode now. It's basically the same 4coder it's always been, with just a different editing paradigm. That's all it took to get that far. It doesn't have multi-cursor, which is all anyone actually cares about, but it has that. So, you know, whatever. Kind of cool. Would this highlight stuff be possible without the variable lifetime stuff you have implemented? Not at all. All the highlight stuff lives through the lifetime stuff. We're gonna that's gonna be part 5 of my blog post. The UI stuff, like the listers, could work without the allocate lifetime management stuff, but it makes a lot of listers a lot easier to have that around. Ironically, I wrote the UI stuff first, so although writing the UI stuff was what forced me into like finally going ahead and doing all of the memory management stuff that I felt like I had wanted for a while, I didn't then go back and put much of that system actually through the memory stuff. So a lot of the UI stuff actually goes through the old way of doing memory management, where you just manually look at hooks and clear your memory yourself and manage tables of stuff. Because even though that's the problem that inspired the solution, why would I switch over to the new solution when the old solution actually works right now? But a bunch of new stuff has since been added to that lifetime management stuff, and the highlight thing doesn't just rely on it, but it's like a subsystem of that thing. Highlights get attached to the scope of a particular buffer, and they can be attached to scopes that are dependent on that buffer, but they have to be specially associated to the buffer they're attached to, because they're markers, and then they have visuals attached to them that determine how to display those markers. We'll go through that all in a blog post, but yeah, it all lives in. all these marker highlighting things live inside of scopes from the lifetime management stuff. Okay, I'm going to be right back to get the lights on, probably fill up my water, and a couple minutes. Okay. Let's track down query replace. Alright, so query replace parameter. Replace base. Okay, so the only problem here is I want it to look like, yeah, so it's doing set highlight, and I need it to be more like, what file is this anyway? I need it to be more like the, actually that's in here too. Whoops, wrong way around. iSearch. Yeah, I want this to be more like iSearch. So, instead of calling set highlight, which is basically just deprecated, does nothing, has no effect, I should probably just take it out pretty soon, in fact. What we're now going to do is, before we start, we grab the view scope, we make a highlight object, we add visuals onto the highlight object, and we set the look for that particular visuals. Character highlight ranges, highlight, add highlight, very good. We want to set the view key. To the view ID, and then we can use the iSearch update highlight function again. Match.min, match.max. Then we want to say cursor is hidden becomes true up here and false down here. And when cursor is hidden becomes false, we also want to free the highlight object. And then finally we want to yeah, that can just do whatever it's doing. That's fine. Right, I gotta give it the highlight as well. There we go. Cool. So let's replace all occurrences of this with foobarb. And there we go, now I have a highlight on my query replace, which I didn't even bother to show you guys the bug to prove that this was a problem, but there we go. Let's put this down here. That was yesterday. This is what we've done so far today. Alright. So we can do keywords here. We can finish up this thing. This is all going to get done today. This is not going to be a problem at all. So this keyword thing is not too hard, except that we have a design problem. And the design problem is this. I have this thing called the render caller. And the render caller can do anything it wants to add new highlights onto a buffer. And then when it's done adding all that stuff, it just has to call do core render and then clean up whatever it added. And all that stuff it adds can then be things like things that follow where the cursor is, things that you only want to generate things close to what's on the view right now, stuff like this. So if you have, for instance, some very complicated stuff, you want to highlight all of the occurrences of the word note, you have a couple of ways you could do that. Every time the buffer is edited, you could then scan the results of that edit to see if there are any more notes and add in markup, and then figure out what parts of the markup, like what that involves shit like if the word note got deleted somewhere, delete that copy of it, and if it got added somewhere, add that in, and it becomes this very complicated thing for you to manage. It's kind of what the core is trying to do for you, is manage that kind of complicated stuff. Like that's what that's what the lecture has to do a lot of the time, is go, okay, this range of stuff has changed, the part that got deleted has affected all of these tokens, so mark this range as no longer trustworthy, and here's the new text that's in its place. So back up a little bit before the do the first, like go a little bit, a few steps into the trustworthy tokens before the edit. Parse through the new text, find where we resync with the old trustworthy tokens, and then replace the old untrustworthy tokens that have, or the old like no longer valid tokens, take them out and put the new ones in their place, possibly making a larger or smaller amount of space for the thing we're putting in place. Very much a lot of work to like get that stuff all to fit together, right? That's the kind of fiddly nonsense that you don't really want to have to do when you're writing customizations for your text editor. You want that fiddly stuff, you want optimizations and fiddly nonsense taken away from you so that all you're doing is writing nice, clean, and this is why I'm able to do stuff like add an iBar highlight mode very quickly. Notepad was an hour and a half of work because I didn't have to do all the fiddly stuff of figuring out view. Like now that I have scopes, I could very easily just add a variable to all views without having to do any fiddly nonsense with that, right? That's the point. So that's one thing you could do, but we don't want customization layers to have to do that because that would mean they're in the business of doing fiddly stuff, which I just said we don't want. Another thing they could do is right before rendering, look through the entire buffer for all of the occurrences of note and add a highlight to all of them. That would work. It would at least be correct, but I feel like that's kind of like one of those things, like if we're gonna support a gigantic buffer someday, that wouldn't be possible. Is there a way we could make it possible to do something like this highlight thing without having to do the entire buffer? If we only had to do what's on screen, then it doesn't matter how big the buffer gets, because even the biggest buffer can only fit a finite number of things on the screen at a time. So if we only have to scan what's on screen and add stuff to that, then we're good. So that's the kind of design I want this to have. I want it to be like the user can say, yo, give me the start and end range so that I can scan it and add highlights to that range doing the do render call. Only problem is it's inside this call where we actually first compute the range that is being rendered, and by the time we call this, it's too late the way it's designed right now. So we have to think about this. We could do a couple of things. Right? If we think about this in terms of, we have this is done. We have different layers of things, and so like at the top layer we have like the core, and right now the way it works is the core calls the do render hook, or the render caller, and then the render caller calls back into the core. And inside the core we do a couple of stages of things. We do process 1, which is figure out the range, process 2 through n, which is everything else. And here we could say that we do another process 1 that's from a different worldview of what the order of step events is. Here process 1 is add the coloring to all the notes. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to have a way so that all the notes only has to mean everything in the range, but the range isn't computed till down here. So what we really are trying to do is figure out, can we reorganize the code in such a way that this becomes possible? Can the do core render be 2 through n and have 1 outside of do core render so that the information from here can get passed into here? Or alternatively, should there be 2 stages here? Compute the range myself. Now what we have is duplicated range computations, but we don't have, like, this is an option, so if we can't find a way to rearrange the core the way I suggested, we could duplicate the computation, maybe. That shouldn't actually be too detrimental to performance because the range isn't that expensive to compute. Another option could be that this actually doesn't happen and that the range is a parameter of this. This would mean that the render caller is not only computing the range, but they're actually specifying something to the core. But do we want them to be able to specify this? Do we want them to be able to say, here's the range we're rendering? That's a little bit confusing because what we're actually rendering is like a view, like a window, we have some concept that there's this entire buffer of what it would look like if we could see the whole thing simultaneously, and where we can only ever see a portion that fits on the view, and we're starting at an XY coordinate and picking what's on that view. If they specify to us a range that isn't the right size, then what would happen? What if they specified to us something that was at the wrong location? What would happen to us? Maybe we want the power for the customization code to change what we're going to see, but I don't think that this would be the right way to express it. That would just be, it's just the wrong angle, the wrong point at which to insert that control. So I think that what I want to do is try to accomplish this. And if we can't do that, then we'll just duplicate the computation. Alright. So, let's start by going and looking through all the code from the thing that first calls the render caller to the beginning of the core and through the computation of the range, and figure out what the relationships here are, because I do believe we can compute the range without any of the stuff that the render caller is trying to do. I think that's possible. It's just, will it be easy to organize the code that way is the only question. So part of the reason why it won't be super straightforward is that all of this code here is set up that gets used in a lot of different places. So we have a partition with a temporary memory getting set, and we have, well, partition means arena, by the way. We have computing the right values for scroll and all of that, figuring out where the render begins happens right here. So this is where we figure out where the render actually starts. And then what happens is we do this, so this code here runs. When it's done, we set end position right here. So we have to get to here, and at this point, we now know the range of the render. So, right after that, what it starts doing is processing markers, which is one of the things we want the render caller to be able to inject into this process. So if this is where it starts getting visual markers, and this is where it's got the range, this right here would be the cut point where we want everything below this to be a new call. And we want the hook called right here instead of up here. We don't want the hook calling into this. We want this part calling into the hook, and then the hook calling into this. That's the way I want to change it. But this is where the organization of the code becomes a real problem. Any arbitrary thing up here could be useful to this code and this code simultaneously, and I don't know what is and isn't. So what I'm going to need to do is to kind of find a way to cleave the code at this point first, figure out the cross-cutting dependencies and how I want to communicate them across a couple of stack frames, and then finally we can make this work with the hook. So let's start with figuring out this cleaving thing. Basically, I want a piece of code that looks like this. Internal void, render loaded file in view, inner. Don't know its parameters yet. Here we go. Right, if you will just please start absorbing down as much as you can. I will help you through the times where you don't know how to absorb down. There we go. Okay. So a couple of problems right away. That end temp right there should be out here. And the rest of this, let's see what happens. We're going to find out all the things that this call here wants to see. And see if it's plausible to split it up. We want anything that doesn't need to be used here to get moved here, anything that needs to be used in both to get passed through, and anything that only needs to get used here obviously won't even come up in the compilation errors. Here we go. Okay, first things first, we want to pass the on-screen range through. So we said that right here we know the range. Let's compute the on-screen range right here and pass that through as a parameter. Okay, what else do I need to pass through? The partition? Yes, of course, of course. So the partition. The file. Okay, I want to try to, while I'm doing this, also keep the order of parameters similar to how they look if, okay, well none of these are coming through as parameters up here. So the partition gets used right here, down here, I'm sure. The file gets used in here, I'm sure. So, yeah. These are definitely some of the things that we need in both. I expect there to be a lot of these things. View, what are we using the view for? Right, because we need to know what we need to know what visuals to apply. Style, where does the style come from? Also, is anyone in here using the style? No, no one in here is even using the style. So, this can be up here. It does mean we need the models, which, by the way, means we don't need the partition because we can get the partition from the models, and that's the preferred method. So models view file on-screen range. Now we can also get the file from the view, but I kind of want to make sure that the file doesn't change on us, so then again, yes I don't. Yes, I don't want that. So doop 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 doop. Alright, what else we got? What else we got? Count. What is count? Right, so count means item count. And that'll come through with this. And so will the render items themselves. Although that should be local count, and how on earth this even worked without that working, I have no idea. I just must have never had enough keys at the same time. Yeah, that's it. The number of keys is never more than like 2 or 3, and this wouldn't become a problem until 16, when the next node needs to have the right count. Okay. Render cursor dot line. So you use the render cursor for a lot of stuff, I suppose, huh? Alright, that's fine. We'll just pass the whole render cursor through. That won't hurt us. Render cursor, on screen range, render items. Wait, what are they called? Items. Items, item count. Tokens use. Okay, so this can just happen up here. Not sure we're checking why. Not sure why we're checking if the file is non-zero. That should just be a given at this point. Item count wrapped. So yeah, wrapped is something we can just grab from the file on both sides. Rect. What is the rect? Right, okay, so the rect can come through right here. And then there's the render target, of course. Have any profile of some sort of debug performance on internal builds? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Debug performance. I don't have a good profiler set up. When I usually just make ad hoc profilers whenever I have a particular issue. I don't have a general system because I'm not, you know, I mean, I should. I'm just not good at maintaining a general system that works for everything. But pretty soon I'm going to go into engine mode and take that kind of stuff. I'm going to do debug views, profiling views, testing framework type thing. I'm going to go into full, like, switching off of alpha mode into beta mode. It's going to be mostly about getting all that quality checking stuff actually fit in permanently for once. It's also going to be about upgrading the engine to have some features it doesn't have, and being more performant on certain things that are currently preventing me from building cool features in 4coder, but all of that's mostly just because I'll be building the tools to do higher quality and more complex optimization stuff. Like pretty much any feature I haven't added to 4coder is pretty much not there because I haven't found a performant way to do it yet, and I'm not interested in doing careful optimization, so I'm looking for the easy things to get right for experimental purposes first. Font ID. Which thing did I forget? Oh, the render target. Alright, cool. So now what we can do is say, right now, this is the thing called by the render caller hook, but we want to rejigger that around. So let's track down right here. We're going to say switch back to always calling this, and don't call to the render caller at all. And then this we're going to grab and say that is going to get moved over here, where we're calling the inner. We're actually going to just call the render caller. And now the trick is just making sure that there's enough information here for everything. So the things we need to push through that we weren't already pushing through are all of these, basically. The models will make it, target will make it, the view will make it, the rect will make it, but the render cursor, on-screen range, all the things that are getting computed above this line need to be pushed in there too. So render cursor there we go. And now when I go to somewhere around here, there's do core render. Yes, I want to go to view UI, do core render, that. I want to move do core render over to this file. I'm going to put it right here, because do core render is the function we pass in there, and that has just been changed to the problem of calling the inner. Now, what has got to happen in inner? Also, why are we getting system at all? Ah, system goes for that. Okay, whatever. Models, target, view, rect. We actually don't need to know if this is active or not anymore, which is interesting. Render cursor, render cursor. On-screen range. Buffer render items. There we go. So that lets us call into the inner call there with all those things. And so when we call this, this will go to, okay, and the only other thing we want to do is check if render caller does not equal 0, we do all this work. If it does equal 0, then we can just make this call anyway. Okay. So nothing should have changed yet. The only implication this has, the major implication this has, is that now it won't be possible for the render caller to change the buffer before it gets rendered, in the sense that it can't edit the buffer. That would be illegal, because we've already generated the, or not that it would be illegal, but it wouldn't be rendered actually. The render items have already been created. What's going to the screen is fixed. The only thing that can be changed now is what the highlights and colors of those things will be. And that's all the render caller can actually do. It can change the buffer, but that won't be present in the thing that gets rendered until the next frame. So I feel like that's fine. That actually makes sense. It's not a place where you're supposed to be doing edits. It's conceptually speaking, at least in my head. So I'm okay with that. Now what we have to do is deal with the fact that I just added a bunch of imaginary things. We need to track those down and make them non-imaginary. Render range. Render cursor. Render items. Render item count. We don't need system anymore either. Okay, so that's cool, and what that means we can do, well, let me make sure everything else still works. Yep, we still have line highlights. I could still go into Notepad-like mode and copy this around, right? I'm not sure why that's so laggy right there. What is that? Do you see that? Is that because of how big the highlight range is? Is this just like the renderer sucking at rectangles? It might be. I mean, it definitely doesn't suffer from that when I'm not holding shift. Like if I go woo, boop, boop, if I go boop, then slow down. I think that's what some of these performance problems are about. It's just the number of rectangles that are getting submitted is being a problem. Compare that to that. Yeah, we should look at that before this ships. Maybe I can speed up the renderer a little bit. Maybe I can batch those rectangles together in a better way. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it. But in the meantime, the render is at least working properly. So it might not be fast enough, but it's correct. So I'm going to press forward a little bit further to change up the API one last time before we ship. The last change to the API is happening right now, besides name stuff, and it is going to be like this. We go to types, render caller function, range on screen range. Okay, so now when we call the render caller, in addition to sending that, we need to send the on screen range down. The on screen range is useful to the render caller because now we have it right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say I also have to keep in mind this is debug mode with OBS, so the performance probably isn't that bad in release. It's just, I mean, I don't know, if it's a rendering problem, it would be. GPUs don't get faster in release mode, so we'll find out, I guess. So the next thing we want to do is we want to figure out text size equals on-screen range 1 pass last minus on-screen range first. Push an array, buffer read range. Buffer start end out. Okay, buffer start end out. Okay, now what we're going to do is for, well, if text I equals capital N, blah, else if text I equals capital T, blah. While tail dot size is greater than 0, tail dot stir plus equals 1, tail dot size minus equals 1. Note to do highlight equals true, color equals pure red, do highlight equals true, color equals pure green. And then what we're going to do, how do we want this to work? I don't necessarily want to make a different managed object for each one. Okay, new plan. We don't do this, or this, or this, or this. We do, no jokes, okay, so the basic idea here is I need to build two managed objects, or I need to build one managed object that has these two non-interleaved or something, because there could be an arbitrary interleaving, so a take rule won't be good enough in this case. I can't make a take rule that has like an arbitrary map. So since these won't interleave in any nice way, I either have to completely segment them into two segments in the same object or two separate objects. But I get them in whatever order I get them in. So what do I want to do? Got it. Okay. We're going to make a thing called a highlight record. And for each highlight record, what we're going to do is we're going to say, here's where it starts, here's one, or we're going to say like first, one past last, color. And then we're going to say highlight record, records, equals, we're going to push an array onto the scratch of highlight records. And then for each of these that we find, we're going to make a new highlight record. The record first will be I plus on screen range first record.one past last will be first plus 4. Record.color will be pure green or red depending on the situation. And then what we'll do is highlight record, push array, a single highlight record, and then boom. Boom. Now, out the other end, we can get the record count by going push array onto scratch of highlight records, 0 of them, and subtract the base of the records. There we go. Now, what we can do is sort by color. Let me see if I have anything that can help with that. Helper sort. Okay, so what we're going to need is, this is going to be promoted to here. Sort highlight records. I'm going to have it, I'm going to have it do that. And then what's going to happen is if first plus 1 is still less than 1 past last, then what we do is we say, so j equals first, int 30, 4, as long as, I starting from first, going no farther than the pivot index, and we're going to write a quicksort. Write a quicksort once a day, people. And then int color, pivot color, or yeah, pivot color equals records pivot index dot color. Then in here what we're going to do is we grab the int color of interest, which is the records I dot color, and if the color we see is less than the pivot color, then what we're going to do is we're going to swap the highlight records between records I and J, and then we're going to increment J by 1. We're going to continue this all the way to the end, at which point we are going to swap the highlight records one more time of the pivot index with J, and then we're going to set the pivot index to J, and then we're going to say sort highlight records first to the pivot index, that's one past the last for the first range, and then the pivot index plus 1 to the one past last for the second range. There's our quick sort. Alright, so first things first, on-screen range needs to go there. There we go. It thinks that I haven't used that variable, but that's just because it doesn't know that I'm going to use that variable when I am finished. Okay, so now it's sorted, and so finally what we can do is iterate We're going to iterate all the records, all the highlight records. For each highlight record we see, we're going to see if it's a new color for us. And we're going to emit a marker. Okay, so step 1 is, do we do an emit? So for the first one, what we'll do is quite simple. Begin in a marker array right here. And then marker position equals the highlight record what is this? The records 0 dot first and one past last. So that gives us the first pair of markers that we need to highlight the first range. And then we want to set the int color current color wait, why don't I just do it this way? To the color from the first records. And this is all going to be if record count is greater than 0, then we'll bother to do all this work, right? So if we get any records of things we want to color, then if we get any, we sort them and we start iterating them. We take the first one and we say the current color is this and here's our marker for it. And then we want to start checking if we need to omit the previous range. So do emit happens if records I.color does not equal the current color. If that ever happens, then we do an emit. What happens when we do an emit? First thing we do is we find out our marker count. We push an array onto the scratch of size 0, subtract that pointer from the base of the markers. That gives us how many markers we have. Then we're going to create an object, alloc buffer markers on buffer, app buffer.bufferid, marker count, render scope. There's our object. Then we're going to managed object set store data, app o, starting from 0, going up to marker count with all of the markers we've got. Then we're going to create a marker visual, app o. Then we're going to set the look of that visual, app v buffer markers type character highlight ranges. We're going to set the highlight to be transparent. We're going to set the text color to be the current color. I just realized a slight failure of this system that I haven't considered before. I'll have to rethink some of this a little bit. There's a probability that I should have been layering changes instead of doing what I'm doing, so that one highlight could set the color of text and another highlight could, well, no, because if we highlight this thing, we're not just setting it to its default for no reason. Yeah, this is actually fine. I like it this way. We're good. I revoke my concern about how this works. For now, at least. Marker visual set look. Transparent highlight. current color of the text, no text style because that's not supported yet. Do I need to set the key? No. Do I need to set the take rule? No. Do I need to set the priority? No. There is some argument to be made that I should have a thing that is like a range that changes the default color before highlights are applied. That would be the thing I actually need. Maybe we'll do that today, or maybe we'll do it in a future build. Not sure. Okay, so that's how we do an emit. Once we've done that, though, we also want to end the temp for the markers so that it starts from scratch. Then what we do is we say, okay, we've emitted, and now we're going to basically do one of these things. Create a new marker. There we go. And that should be it. Uh-oh, to do doesn't work. Actually, what doesn't work is everything after the... What? What is this nonsense? Well, something bad is happening, don't you think? Okay, so that continues to align correctly no matter what I do with it. This to do, as it gets closer, it's like overlapping the green highlight. I see the problem. I see the problem. I skip this and this ahead. I don't skip I ahead. And so the positions get off. To do note. Okay, it's still not quite right, but the reason for that is pretty obvious. I'm skipping I ahead, but I'm doing it before I should, which is affecting where the record believes it lives. To do note. Let's pull up some indentation code. And we can see right here, if I find any, there's my note. There's another note. There's another note. Let's pull up something else. There's a to-do, and there's the highlight being weird. So if I'm searching for this, the to-do overrides the highlight of the incremental search, the redness of the to-do. So I want to lower the priority of the text coloring thing, actually. So when I create one of these visuals, I want to set the visual priority to the lowest possible setting, I guess. Visual priority lowest. I want that to get overridden by other highlights easily. Other highlights will tend to use the default color. But I've realized what I need is a thing that runs before everything else that changes, that lets you modify default colors. Like a different layer that does that, and they stack or something. I don't know. Alright, this is worthy of a screenshot, so 1 second. Screenshot that. Do 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 do. Okay. Whoops. I know that you suck at paint, but could you try not to, maybe? For a moment? There we go. That can go up to Twitter. Alright, so I think this is a good time for me to take a break. We're almost at 3 hours, which is a nice long stream. I think if I shut it down, have a 30-minute break, I can come back, and there's still, you know, a sizable to-do list here, but we just did this, this, and this. And so as I predicted, this to-do list, we can just tear it up real quick. It's not that hard. So we are going to basically finish up by getting some parenthesis matching stuff figured out, and then maybe we can move on to even these things. This is the stuff I absolutely needed to get done today, and we're almost done with it. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think one more session is going to be very good. There might also be a lot of value in making like a declarative system for keyword direct coloring or something like this. I also have to remember that we have a lot of documentation work to do. So once I get all this done, if I have any spare time, I could get started with that, started with stuff that needs to happen next week. I want to look at that performance thing. That should probably come up here. Performance of lots of highlighted rectangles on screen is poor. Fix it. Okay. So, I think that will be it for now. I will see you guys later. Bye bye.